Greetings everybody. My name is Enveri Sufi. I work in Institute for Organic Agriculture in Albania. I am expert in plant protection and organic agriculture. The title of our presentation for today is Some Damage Symptoms on Crops from Different Parasites. Determination of insect pests and diseases through visual symptoms of damage. For determination what has caused the damage in the field could help very much the type of damage on the plant organs. Before that, we need to know what is the feeding mechanism to different groups of insect pests. If we know such information, we are be able to understand what kind of group of insect has caused these symptoms. That is so because different insects has a different form of feeding. On the other hand, the different insect pests have the different mouth parts. According to the mechanism of feeding, is created certain symptoms. That means the symptoms are linked with type of mouth parts of insect pest or with feeding mechanism. There are some mouth parts among the insects. One form is biting chewing form. For example, grasshoppers, the beetles, has such mouth apparat. Chewing form, piercing and sucking form, sap-sucking insect, for example. In this group are include aphids, the bugs, the mosquitoes, etc. Lapping form, for example, honeybee. Another form is sponging, for example, we find this kind of apparat to the flies. Now we demonstrate some symptoms according to the different group of the insect. For example, here we have thrips damage form. We see the symptoms. Decolorized of green leaves in the white color. If we see these symptoms, could suspect for thrips. Here, spider mite damage symptoms. Decolorized of green leaves into the bronze color. If we see such symptoms on the plant, could suspect for spider mite. Holes on the leaves are caused from snails. We see this symptom during the day, but we don't see the snail on the plant because the snails are fed during the night. During the day, they stay under the earth surface or under the leaves or under the mulching materials. If we see with attention the surface of the leaves, we see that the leaf is dotted from mouth part with sap-sucking type of mechanism from the bugs. You see it's a small, that is caused from sap-sucking mechanism. The damage from the fleas on the cabbage, small holes on the leaves with the high density. In this case, we see the insect on the leaves. In another case, we don't see insect on the leaves. But if we see such symptoms, we need to suspect from this group of insects. We see here two symptoms. These symptoms look like the same, but the picture on the left is caused from mite Eriophis vitis, where the galls are upper side of the leaves, while in the picture on the right side is damage from Phylloxera vitis, leaf form, because the Phylloxera, as we know, has two forms, the root forms and the leaf forms. For people without experience, this kind of symptoms look like the same, but in reality has the differences, perhaps need more attention in determination of the symptoms in the field. Here we have live minor insects. Larvae are inside the plant tissues. From the form of the mines is determined species of the live minor. The left picture symptoms are caused from Leromyza trifoli. The right picture from Tuta absoluta is a live minor in the vegetable. Some years before, when the Tuta absoluta is appeared for the first time, many farmers thought are the symptoms of Leromyza trifoli. And in such cases, the farmers had a big damage because underestimated. Later understand the farmers, the producer, that is a big difference between the symptoms from galeriform caused from Leromyza trifoli and gallery caused from Tuta absoluta. Now the people are more clear. In the beginning, this kind of confusion in determination caused a damage in the vegetable production. Here are some examples of symptoms from different species of minor moths in fruit trees and the forest trees. As we see, the different form of gallery, different form of the mines, is a criteria for determination of the species. Different species cause the different form of the mines on the leaves. We see here a live minor Phylocnistis citrella on the citrus leaves. If you see in the tension inside the issue of the leaves, we see the larva is feeding with chlorophyll of the plant of the leaves. You see the form of gallery. This insect is the key insect in citrus, especially in young trees, especially in nursery. In the big trees, it's not so big problem, but this is form of gallery of this kind of. This symptom is caused from olive fly. We see the holes in the fruits. We see the gallery of inside the fruits. We need to emphasize the adult of the flies, including the olive fly, don't feed with green part of the plants. Don't eat the plant issue, but the flies has another source of feeding as honeydew, the pollen, the fruits on the ground, but not eat the green material. We see this picture from Mediterranean fruit fly Ceratitis capitata. The infected fruits fall down on the ground. Inside the lemon or mandarin fruits, we see the white larva. In general, the flies has a white larva and a legless larva. We see here inside the pulp of the mandarin two larvae from Mediterranean fruit fly Ceratitis capitata. Here we see the symptoms of codling moth Pseudopommonella in the apple. we see the infection of new trees from first generation, and we see the full grown fruits from second generation. Especially from first generation, some new producer without experience could be in confusion with this symptom, two fruits together. This is characteristic from clothing mold infection from first generation. Here, inside the pulp of plum fruits, we see the Grapholita funebrana larvae. This is a plum mold. It's characteristic for this. The big groups of symptoms are deformation of the leaves. Majority of the cases, these symptoms is caused from infection from aphids. Different species of aphids cause a different form of deformation. Here we see the aphids in cherry trees, in plum, and in apple. Here deformation of leaves from plum aphid. Sometimes the farmers control under the side of the leaves but don't find the aphids. In these cases, the aphids are eaten from beneficial insect. Coccinellidia group are very effective against the aphids. Sometimes we don't find aphids because they are eaten from beneficial insect, perhaps from climatic conditions, but symptoms belongs to aphids. If we see soot mold on the leaves of the fruits, these symptoms has the origin from infection or from one of the four insects, or from scales, or from aphids, from whitefly, or from mealybugs. This kind of insect produce from their body some honeydews with some liquid with sugar content. Above this sugar content, these honeydews are installed the saprophyte diseases that called soot mold. That means we need to control such kind of insects in order to avoid this kind of soot mold on the leaves. The main cause are this insect. If we see such symptoms, this soot mold, a saprophyte diseases is on the fruits. These saprophyte diseases with black color has the origin from infection from one of the four insects as I mentioned above, or could be scale, aphids, whitefly, or from mealybugs. This kind of layer, black layer on the fruits and the leaves, reduce the vigor of the plants. It reduces the photosynthesis processes, and the plants are weak and more weak, and perhaps if continue for many years this kind of situation, the life of the plant is in danger too. We see here the Colorado beetles, Leptinotersa decimlinata. We see here the adult and the larva. Adult eat not so much biomass, but the larvae are very danger. Within some days they can destroy all the parcel of the potatoes because are very aggressive in reduction of biomass. Here we see the olive leaves eaten from dark red weevil. We see here the characteristic symptoms, the specific symptoms. This is caused from Coleoptera Otorhynchus cribricolis. Leaves are eating in the saw teeth form. Perhaps we don't see on the olive the adult, the insect, but if we see the symptoms, of course, we need to understand this is caused from Otorhynchus, and it's quite easy. We see here two forms of damage from Otorhynchus sulcatus in the grape. We see the adult is feeding the leaves, and we see the larvae is feeding the roots. That means we need to know in detail the biology of this insect in order to determine this is typical damage of Otorhynchus sulcatus in the new roots of the grape. The form of the larva in C form and the yellow head is characteristic from this kind of larva. It's a big group of insects that create the nest on the crown of the trees. One example here is apple moth Hypomoneuta malinella. He created here the nest. According to the form of the nest, according to the larvae, we will be able to understand, to determine what kind of insect has caused this kind of symptoms. Another example of insect that create a nest is gold-tailed moth, Euproctis similis. This is Processionaria on the pine. If we see in the top of the tree such kind of nets, and if you see the larvae are moving in this form, directly we need to think we have to do with Processionaria on the pine. Need to emphasize something. All the insect pests that cause the gnats on the tree, the larvae are very allergic from the skin of the people. Need, especially if we have the tree near our home, near our house, need to take care to avoid the coming of the larvae inside the home because are very allergic. This is characteristic from all the insects that create the nets on the trees. If we see such symptoms in the apple, in the plum, in the pear, we need to think. This is apple sawfly, Haplocampa tustudinea, in apple or in pear. We see here the symptoms in the young fruits and the symptoms in the big fruits. This group of the insects begin the infection in flowering time. The family lay the eggs in ovarium of the flowers, and the new fruits are just infected. That means we need to control very early in order to determine the damage of this insect. We see such different symptoms. We need to be familiar with this kind of symptoms because in some cultivars, damage from such group of insect is very high. Some example from mine moths symptoms and some picture from adults. There are many species of micromoths. We see here more or less this is the form of life miners, has so many species but are very small and has different colors, a different form. This is life miners. According to the species, we are be able to determine the symptoms. We see here different form of mine has to do with the different species of life mine. They are life minor in vegetable and in the citrus. Form of the mines on the leaves are the basis for determination of the species. Life minor in decorative plants as wild castanea. In this case, the mine has quite another form. This insect, sometimes one time for 3 or 4 or 6 years, make a big damage and create a defoliation of the plants, decorative plants. You see here the mines has a different form in comparison with life minor in the fruit trees, life minor in the citrus, etc., in vegetables. We see another symptoms in the fruit trees caused from insect make damage the branches and the trunk of the trees. We see here the photo from Zausera pyrina, and photo below are damage and the adult from Cossus cossus. Zausera pyrina make the damage in the branches, and Cossus cossus make the damage in the trunk. We see here the apple here with a hole, and on the ground is the dust, sawdust. This kind look like a sawdust is a typical symptom to think about damage from this insect. That means that first of all we need to control the trunk and branches from the holes, from such kind of saw, in order to understand or trees are healthy or has something. We need, because some cultivars are very sensible to insect of the trunk, the insect of the branches. But we need to train to determine the diagnosis, the symptoms since the beginning, to avoid, because if we have a strong infection, the whole the plant is destroyed. Physical is destroyed. That means in these cases the damage is really big, because the chemical treatments in such kind of insect are a little bit are limited, because they are inside the trunk, inside the branches. Perhaps it's early to make the determination of damage as better is. If we see such kind of symptoms in the fruit trees, in majority of the cases is caused from rabbits. A rabbit eat the skin of the fruit trees. In some regions they make the big damage. In big trees or in small young trees, especially in nursery. As we know, the birds are our friends. The birds are a very positive element of our agroecosystem. But sometimes, if the population are so big, they make a damage in agriculture. We see such symptoms in the grape, in the rice, in the wheat, in the maize, corn. But if we speak about control of the rabbit and the control of the birds, need to many care, because they are a very important element of our agrosystem. We need to make the control measure, or to make a friendly control measure in order to avoid the destroying of such population, because sometimes damage caused in agriculture is smaller in comparison to the contribute of such kind of living organism in the environment. If we see such kind of symptoms, this is fire blight, Erwinia millivora, if we see on the surface of the fruits such kind of drops, such kind of exudate, bacterial exudate, and if we see such symptoms in the new branches, in the new fruits, this is caused from fire blight. Another characteristic for fire blight is the new shoots are in the embryal form. In the embryal form. If we see such kind of symptoms, we need to take the measure, because this is a very dangerous disease, especially in a region with humidity. Some cultivars are very sensitive, some cultivars of apple or pear are tolerant, some cultivars are resistant, but nevertheless the Erminia millivora is key diseases in fruit trees, especially in apple and in the pears. Here we see the symptoms of powdery mildew, Uncinula necator, on the grape. We see here the bears are destroyed. We see here the white layer of the conidian on the surface of the berries. Downy mildew symptoms, Plasmopara viticola on the grape. In the first picture we see here the beginning of the infection. Later we have here so-called spot of oil spot color. Later, under the side of the leaves, we have the conidian of the Plasmopara viticola. In picture here we see the infection before the flowering time. This is infection, the berries are in growing, and we have here the berries are before the coloring. These are the different symptoms of a powdery mildew. Sometimes the people without experience are not be able to determine what are the symptoms from powdery mildew and the downy mildew, especially in beginning of the infection. Something is clear. Powdery mildew begins much earlier than downy mildew, Plasmopara viticola. In the beginning begins the infection from powdery mildew, and later begins the infection from downy mildew. This is the symptoms of Venturion equalis in the apple. Apple scab is key diseases in the apple. It's number one diseases all over the world, especially in the region with high humidity during the summer. Is very danger, and need to determine as early as better in the beginning of vegetation. This is smooth diseases on corn, Ustilagosea. We see the deformation. Here we see smooth diseases on wheat, Ustilaga tritici. We see here the symptoms of the rust on the wheat, Puccinia graminis, well-known diseases all over the world. In some regions make a big damage. Some cultivars are sensible, some cultivars are tolerant, some of them are resistant. This we see here the spore, red spore on the surface of the leaves. Fusarium species is a big group of diseases, especially in vegetable, outdoor and indoor vegetable. We see here a heavy infection in tomatoes. The symptom is tomatoes blight, Phytophthora infestan, a heavy infection. This is potatoes blight, Phytophthora infestans. We see here a field destroyed totally from these diseases. If the tubers are infected, the damage continue in the store too. This disease is really number one diseases all over the world. It's key diseases in potatoes all over the world. The weeds are another big problem for producer too. Weeds are divided in three main groups: monocotyledon group, dicotyledon group, and parasite plants. We see in the picture how germinate and monocotyledon group and how germinate dicotyledon group of the weeds. Here we have some example of weeds from dicotyledon plants. We see here Sinapis nigra, Canapodium album, Amaranthus retoflexis, Datura stramonium. Is a big number of dicotyledon plants as weeds in all crops. The second group of the weeds are monocotyledon weeds. It's a big group and very difficult to control. Almost in every crops they are present, and without control measure, without direct control measure or preventive control measure, they make a big damage in agriculture. As I mentioned before, the third group of the weeds are the parasitic weeds. We have here Cuscuta arvensis, the first photo, and another photo, Viscum alba, parasitic plants. In some conditions, such kind of weeds make the big damage. For example, Cuscuta arvensis is always present in alfalfa and in vegetable, especially in primitive agriculture. In agriculture, that underestimate the agronomic measure, underestimate non-chemic control measure, where the situation is bad, is very bad, and infection in such kind of agriculture is very heavy. But in the agriculture, with discipline, with plant rotation, with hygiene in the field, hygiene or organic manure, the situation is much better. And so Viscum alba is not always present, but nevertheless we can find it. Sometimes we find some parasitic plants in tobacco, but this group is important, but has not the same importance as a monocotyledon and dicotyledon group. Nevertheless, need to take care to avoid dissemination of the seed, and to reduce the damage as much as possible. This is the last slide of our presentation for today. Our goal was to train you how to determine the insect pests and diseases direct from symptoms on the plants. If you have such information, you are more clear to organize the control measure in professional way. In next presentation, together, we will speak more in detail for such insect pests and diseases. But this kind of introduction hope to help you to understand better the next lesson. Thank you very much for your attention, and goodbye to the next lesson.